Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time. Not to a grand battlefield or a royal court, but into the hushed. Imagine yourself there, perhaps a young woman, corseted and coiffed, navigating a sea of rustling silks and hushed whispers. You're holding a fan, not just a pretty accessory, but a device humming with unspoken secrets, a silent sentinel of desires and rejections. Every subtle flick, every deliberate spread, every coy half-closure is a word, a sentence, a whispered confession in a language only the initiated can understand. It's a world where a blush could mean ruin, and a glance could spark a lifelong romance, all mediated by the elegant flutter of a handheld fan. You probably won't survive this journey without a newfound appreciation for how utterly complex and utterly ridiculous social interaction used to be. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You might be picturing a delicate, lace-trimmed object, perhaps painted with a pastoral scene or gilded with intricate patterns. That's certainly part of the story. But to truly understand the Victorian fan, you have to push further back, much further back, to a time when a breeze was not just a sensation, but a sacred gift. Your first stop on this journey through the history of the fan isn't Victorian London, but the scorching sands of ancient Egypt. Imagine, if you will, the relentless sun beating down. In the very cradle of civilization that you encounter the earliest forms of fans, not as delicate social instruments, but as powerful, almost mystical tools. These weren't the folding contraptions you're probably envisioning. No, these were often large, rigid affairs, crafted from palm leaves, woven reeds, or even, for the pharaohs and high priests, magnificent ostrich feathers. You see them depicted in hieroglyphs, clutched in the hands of servants, fanning their masters during elaborate feasts, or wafting cool air over the mummified remains of royalty. These early fans were undeniably practical, a simple and effective way to alleviate the oppressive heat, a connection to the very breath of the gods. So, you find them not just in daily life, but in religious ceremonies, used to purify the air. It's a chicken and egg situation. But what's clear is that the fan quickly transcended its humble origins from Egypt. Your journey takes a logical leap eastward. You find yourself in the vast and ancient land of China, where the fan takes on new dimensions of artistry and philosophical depth. Here, the fan isn't just about moving air. You see scholars and artists meticulously painting landscapes, calligraphy, and intricate scenes on silk and paper fans. These aren't just for cooling. They are expressions of culture, status, and personal taste. It's a far cry from a simple palm frond, isn't it? The Chinese also mastered the art of the folding fan, a truly ingenious invention that would eventually transform the fan's role across the globe. Imagine the convenience, a fan that could collapse into a compact form, easily tucked into a sleeve or belt. This wasn't just a design improvement, it was a revolution in portability and discretion. A folding fan, on the other hand, can be deployed and concealed with a subtle flick of the wrist. This subtle quality, this potential for hidden meaning, will become absolutely crucial when we finally arrive in the Victorian era. As you drift further across the ancient world, you encounter fans in India, often intricately woven and adorned with precious stones used in religious rites and by royalty. You see them in Japan, where they developed their own distinct aesthetic, becoming an integral part of traditional dance, theater, and even martial arts. The Japanese sensu, or folding fan, became a symbol of respect, friendship, and even communication, with specific designs conveying different meanings. It's almost as if, across disparate cultures, the fan was independently evolving this silent language, this capacity for conveying more than just a breeze. So, by the time you even think about the Victorian era, the fan has already had a long, storied life. It has been a symbol of divinity, a practical tool, a work of art, a philosophical aid, and a subtle communicative device. It has cooled pharaohs, inspired poets, and accompanied samurai. You're beginning to understand that the Victorian fan wasn't born in a vacuum. It inherited a legacy of utility, artistry, and, most importantly, the potential for unspoken communication. It's this deep, often overlooked history that sets the stage for its dramatic transformation into the quintessential Victorian accessory and, indeed, its secret weapon. You might even find yourself looking at your own modern electric fan with a newfound respect, wondering what silent tales its ancestors could tell. It's not just moving air, is it? It's echoing millennia of human ingenuity and expression. You're starting to get the sense that even the most mundane objects can have the most fascinating backstories, sometimes far more interesting than the grand narratives we usually focus on. After all, who needs another story about a king when you can uncover the whispered secrets of a fan? From the ancient, sun-baked lands of Egypt and the contemplative artistry of the East, your journey with the fan now charts a course westward towards the cooler climes and developing societies of Europe. Imagine the transition, less about divine symbolism and more about practical comfort, then slowly, almost imperceptibly, about burgeoning social status. The fan, in its most rudimentary forms, arrived in Europe not with a bang, but with a gentle whisper, largely via trade routes and cultural exchange, particularly after the Crusades. You can picture those early European encounters with the fan, perhaps a returning knight, having experienced the refreshing waft of a palm frond in the Middle East, bringing the idea, or even a physical fan, back to his chilly stone castle. Initially, the fan in Europe was a simple, rigid affair, not unlike its ancient Egyptian ancestors. Think large, fixed screens made of feathers, woven straw, or parchment, typically mounted on a handle. These were primarily practical tools to combat the oppressive heat of summer, or perhaps to ward off flies during a lavish feast. You can almost feel the heavy velvet and wool clothing of the European elite, making a simple breeze an absolute necessity for comfort rather than a luxury. This initial adoption was slow, a practical innovation more than a fashion statement. It wasn't something everyone had, but if you were someone of means, a large, ornate fan could certainly contribute to your comfort, especially in a grand hall packed with bodies and roaring fires. But as with all things that offer comfort or utility, the fan soon began its inevitable ascent into the realms of fashion and status. The Renaissance, with its explosion of art, culture, and a renewed interest in classical antiquity, proved to be a fertile ground for the fan's transformation. You find yourself in the opulent courts of Italy, where powerful families, like the Medici, embraced the fan as a new symbol of wealth and sophistication. These weren't just practical tools anymore. They were becoming works of art in their own right, crafted from increasingly exotic materials brought back by explorers and traders. Imagine the sheer spectacle: fans made from perfumed leather, intricately carved ivory, or even rare, brightly colored bird feathers. They might be adorned with miniature paintings, precious jewels, or delicate embroidery. Holding such an object immediately set you apart. It wasn't about the breeze it created so much as the statement it made about your access to luxury goods, your refined taste, and your participation in the latest trends. A simple flick of a fan could silently proclaim, "I am important, I am wealthy, I am cultured." The spread of the fan through Europe was also heavily influenced by powerful women who recognized its potential. Catherine de' Medici, often credited with introducing many Italian fashions to the French court, is a pivotal figure. When she arrived in France in the mid-16th century, she brought with her an entourage of Italian customs and objects. Among them, undoubtedly, beautiful fans. Suddenly, the French aristocracy, always keen to emulate the latest courtly trends, took notice. You can almost hear the excited whispers in the Parisian salons. "Have you seen the Queen's new fan? It's simply divine." From France, the fan's popularity rippled outwards, reaching England during the Elizabethan era. Queen Elizabeth I, ever the fashionista and shrewd manipulator of imagery, quickly adopted the fan as part of her royal regalia. You see portraits of her, hand subtly poised, a magnificent fan often completing her regal ensemble. For Elizabeth, and indeed for her court, the fan became an extension of royal power and a symbol of national prosperity. As increasingly elaborate fans were either imported or later produced by burgeoning English artisans. This mainstream historical fact, the adoption of the fan by European royalty, cemented its place as a high-status accessory. However, it's important to remember that during this period, most fans were still the rigid, screen type. They were beautiful, yes, but unwieldy. Imagine trying to carry one discreetly in a crowded room. It would be like trying to slip a small billboard into your purse. This unwieldiness limited their practical application and, crucially, their potential. For subtle communication, they were for display, for grandeur, for public pronouncements of wealth, not for whispered secrets. Now for a quirky tidbit. Did you know that in some European courts, particularly in the 17th century, the fan was sometimes used to convey a message of disapproval? A lady might vigorously fan herself when a suitor was being particularly tedious, or even slap her fan against her palm with a sharp crack to signal annoyance. It's a far cry from the delicate flirtations of the Victorian era, isn't it? More of a blunt instrument than a subtle code, but it shows the early stirrings of the fan as a communicative device beyond just cooling. It suggests that even before the folding fan made its grand entrance, people were already experimenting with its expressive potential, albeit in a rather unsubtle fashion. As the centuries progressed, the fan remained a fixture among the European elite. The 17th and 18th centuries saw fans become even more extravagant, reflecting the Baroque and Rococo aesthetics of the time. Think of the intricate, often hand-painted scenes on vellum or silk leaves, depicting mythological figures, pastoral landscapes, or romantic vignettes. These were true miniature works of art, often commissioned from renowned artists. The handles were no less elaborate, crafted from mother-of-pearl, tortoiseshell, or even gold and silver, sometimes studded with precious gems. Historians still argue whether the widespread adoption of the fan in European high society was primarily driven by climate control or by the intrinsic human desire for status symbols. Was it a practical necessity that became fashionable, or a fashion trend that offered practical benefits? It's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario, much like its ancient uses. However, regardless of the primary driver, the fan had firmly established itself in the European consciousness as an indispensable accessory for the discerning gentlewoman, and sometimes gentleman too. You can almost feel the shift in atmosphere. The clunky, rigid fan of old was slowly giving way to something more refined, more adaptable. The stage was being set for the folding fan, which, as we touched upon briefly when discussing China, was already a sophisticated design. The rigid fan, for all its beauty, limited interaction. You couldn't discreetly glance over it or nervously flutter it when a dashing suitor approached. It was an object of display, a static proclamation. But the folding fan, with its dynamic movement, its capacity to open and close, to conceal and reveal, held a promise of something far more intimate, far more intriguing. It promised a language, and that promise would be fully realized in the very particular social climate of the Victorian era. As you consider this evolution, remember that the journey of the fan from a basic utility to a lavish status symbol was a slow, organic process, mirroring the development of European society itself. It wasn't a sudden invention, but a gradual refinement and reimagining of an ancient tool. And it's this long history, this slow burn of increasing sophistication and symbolic weight, that makes the Victorian fan's story so utterly fascinating. It wasn't just a pretty thing. It carried the weight of centuries of human ingenuity and desire for expression, waiting for its moment to truly speak volumes without uttering a single sound. You've traversed continents and centuries, from the ceremonial fronds of ancient Egypt to the status symbols of European courts, observing the fan's slow, deliberate evolution. Now, as you stand on the cusp of the Victorian era, you need to understand the pivotal invention that truly transformed the fan from a beautiful but unwieldy accessory into the discreet and powerful communicative device it became, the folding fan. While we touched upon its origins in China, its widespread adoption and refinement in Europe marked a significant turning point. Screen-style fan that dominated European fashion for centuries. It was grand, yes, a testament to wealth and artistry, but practically it was a bit of a nuisance. You couldn't easily put it away. It was always on, always visible. Trying to conduct a secret conversation with a rigid fan would be like trying to whisper across a crowded room while holding up a dinner plate. Not exactly subtle. Enter the folding fan. The precise moment and exact route by which the folding fan, already perfected in the East, arrived and became widely adopted in Europe is a fascinating, if somewhat debated, mainstream historical fact. While some accounts point to Marco Polo bringing them back from China in the 13th century, their widespread popularity in Europe really took hold much later. Around the late 16th and early 17th centuries, largely through Portuguese and Spanish traders. These maritime powers had extensive contact with Asian cultures, and it's through these commercial and cultural arteries that the ingenious design of the folding fan finally flowed into Western consciousness. You can almost visualize the initial wonder and excitement. Here was a device that offered all the benefits of a Fana cooling breeze, a surface for artistic display, but with the added revolutionary feature of portability and discretion. It could collapse neatly into a compact form, easily slipped into a glove, a pocket, or a reticule, a small handbag. For those of you not up on your Victorian accessories, this wasn't just a design improvement, it was a paradigm shift. The fan was no longer a static prop. It was dynamic, mutable, capable of concealment and sudden revelation. The mechanism itself, while seemingly simple, is a marvel of engineering. Think of the fan's sticks or monture, the individual ribs, typically made of wood, ivory, bone, or mother of pearl. These sticks are joined at a pivot point at the base, allowing them to fan out. Overlaid on these sticks is the leaf or mount, the decorated material, usually paper, silk, vellum, or lace, which is pleated and attached to the sticks. When the sticks are drawn together, the leaf folds neatly into a compact package. When the sticks are spread apart, the leaf expands into a graceful arc. Open and close with a mere flick of the wrist was key. It allowed for rapid deployment and swift concealment, making the fan an ideal tool for discreet communication in public spaces. Imagine the subtle power to appear to be merely fanning oneself, while simultaneously sending a coded message across a crowded ballroom. This was the true genius of the folding fan for the Victorian era. As the 17th and 18th centuries progressed, European fan makers rapidly embraced the folding fan, pushing the boundaries of its artistry and mechanical ingenuity. Centers like France, particularly Paris, became renowned for their exquisite fan production. You find fan makers, known as eventailists, becoming highly skilled artisans, often members of guilds, protecting their craft secrets. They would collaborate with painters, engravers, and carvers to create miniature masterpieces. The materials grew increasingly lavish: delicate lace from Brussels, intricately carved ivory from African elephants, a tragic side note in the history of luxury goods, mother of pearl, shimmering with iridescence, and even tortoiseshell, prized for its unique patterns. A mainstream historical fact often overlooked is the sheer scale of the fan-making industry. It wasn't just a handful of bespoke artisans. By the 18th century, especially leading into the 19th, fan manufacturing was a significant industry employing thousands, from the most aristocratic to the emerging middle class. While the most exquisite fans remained exclusive, simpler, more affordable paper fans became widely available. This democratization of the fan meant that its potential for a secret language wasn't confined to the very elite. It could spread through society. Here's a quirky tidbit. During the French Revolution, the fan briefly took on a political role. Some fans were subtly decorated with revolutionary symbols or colors, allowing their owners to display their allegiances without overt declaration. Conversely, others depicted royalist imagery. It's a fascinating glimpse into how even seemingly frivolous accessories can become vessels for deeply held. Imagine attending a salon, innocently fanning yourself, while your fan's hidden imagery subtly signals your political leanings. It adds a layer of quiet defiance to an otherwise elegant object. The fan's design also evolved to suit various occasions. You had grand, large fans for evening balls, often richly decorated and designed for maximum impact. Then there were smaller, plainer day fans for more casual outings or morning visits. There were even cockade fans, which folded into a compact circle like a rosette before springing open. This diversification meant that a lady could have a fan for every outfit, every event, and, crucially, every type of communication. Historians still argue whether the development of the folding fan was primarily driven by aesthetic desire or by practical need for a more portable cooling device. Was it the beauty of the folded form that captivated, or the sheer convenience? The truth, as often is the case, is likely a blend of both. Undeniable, but its supreme practicality, its ability to be tucked away and produced with a silent flourish, ultimately cemented its place in society. This portability and discreet nature of the folding fan made it perfectly suited for the rigid social structures and unspoken codes of the Victorian era. In a society where direct conversation, especially between unmarried men and women, was heavily chaperoned and constrained, nonverbal communication became a vital art form. The fan, no longer a mere windmaker or a static display of wealth, was now a dynamic instrument capable of subtle, rapid, and secret interactions. It was poised to become the ultimate Victorian text message, a silent telegraph for the drawing room flirt. The stage is now perfectly set for you to witness how this elegant, foldable object became the very essence of clandestine communication, a silent accomplice in a world of veiled glances and hushed intentions. You're about to discover how a simple object, through its design and its context, could hold so much power. You've seen the fan evolve from a practical tool to a symbol of status, finally perfected in its foldable form. Now, imagine yourself stepping into the heart of Victorian society, a world governed by an invisible but ironclad rulebook of etiquette. This is where the folding fan truly came into its own, becoming far more than a simple accessory. In an era obsessed with propriety, where public displays of emotion or direct communication, particularly between unmarried individuals, were highly constrained, the fan offered a vital, often subversive outlet. It was in this atmosphere of rigid social constraint that the secret language of the fan flourished. Think about it. Victorian society was a labyrinth of unwritten rules. Young ladies were chaperoned, conversations were formal, and direct declarations of interest, particularly from a gentleman to a lady, were considered utterly scandalous if not properly introduced. A slight glance could be misconstrued, a lingering touch unthinkable. Into this meticulously choreographed social dance stepped the fan, an object that could move, flutter, open, and close with infinite subtle variations. It was perfectly designed to convey messages in plain sight, yet remain invisible to the uninitiated or the disapproving eye of a vigilant chaperone. This mainstream historical fact, the strictures of Victorian etiquette, is the bedrock upon which the fan's secret language was built. The era valued decorum above all else. Emotions were to be kept in check, desires often suppressed. Yet, human nature, being what it is, finds a way. Just as flowers were given specific meanings, the language of flowers or florography was another popular Victorian code, and even postage stamps placed at certain angles could send messages. The fan offered a dynamic, interactive form of nonverbal communication. It was a silent rebellion against the stifling formality, a clandestine conversation happening under the very noses of society's watchful eyes. Imagine a crowded ballroom, a symphony of rustling silks, polite laughter, and the distant strains of a waltz. You, a young lady, stand with your chaperone, acutely aware of the glances being exchanged across the room. A dashing gentleman catches your eye. Direct speech is out of the question. A smile might be too bold, but your fan can speak volumes. A slow, deliberate fanning could signal I am married, while a rapid, almost agitated flutter might scream I am engaged, or, conversely, I am bored. Context, as always, was everything, but the fan provided the canvas. The beauty of the fan language lay in its ambiguity, a quirky tidbit you might find amusing. While there were supposedly widely agreed upon codes published in etiquette books, which we'll delve into more later, the reality was often far more nuanced and personalized. A gentleman and lady might develop their own specific lexicon of fan movements, known only to them. This added an extra layer of intrigue and intimacy. It wasn't just about knowing a code, it was about knowing their code. This secret dialect created a bond, a shared understanding that deepened the allure of the forbidden communication. Imagine the thrill of knowing that a gentle tap of her fan against her cheek meant I love you, while to anyone else it simply looked like she was perhaps a little warm. Historians still argue whether the fan language was truly a universal, formalized system or more of an informal, adaptable set of gestures used predominantly by the upper echelons of society. Was it rigidly taught and widely understood, like a second language, or was it a fluid? Evidence suggests it was probably a bit of both. Etiquette guides, certainly, published codes, suggesting a desire for standardization. However, the true art lay in the subtle variations, the almost imperceptible nuances that could transform a generic signal into a deeply personal one. The physical fan itself became an extension of the individual, its quality, its decoration, and the manner in which it was held and manipulated all spoke volumes about its owner. A lady might have dozens of fans, each suited to a different gown, a different occasion, and perhaps a different communicative purpose. The fan was not merely an object, it was an actor in the grand play of Victorian social interaction. Consider the role of the chaperone. These vigilant guardians of propriety were omnipresent, particularly for young unmarried women. Their eyes, however, could not penetrate every subtle movement. They might notice a fan being used, but unless they were intimately familiar with the code being used, and often they were not, being from an older generation or simply less attuned to the subtle flirtations of youth, the true message would pass right over their heads. This ability to operate beneath the radar of authority made the fan language incredibly appealing. It was a silent rebellion, a sophisticated game of cat and mouse played out in drawing rooms and ballrooms. The popularity of the fan language also speaks to the intense social pressures of the era. With so many restrictions on open expression, people became incredibly adept at nonverbal cues. A raised eyebrow, a slight tilt of the head, A particular way of holding a teacup could carry unspoken meaning. The fan, however, offered the most elaborate and versatile system. It was literally designed for movement and concealment. Its very structure, a series of moving sticks and a flexible leaf, lent itself to a dynamic range of gestures. You can almost feel the tension in the air of a Victorian gathering. Every interaction was scrutinized. Every move had potential meaning. To be socially adept meant not just knowing what to say, but knowing what not to say, and how to convey what was unsaid. The fan became the ultimate tool for this delicate balancing act. It allowed for bold declarations to be made with a subtle gesture, for rejections to be delivered without a harsh word, and for flirtations to bloom without ever breaking the rules of decorum. The importance of the fan wasn't just in its ability to send messages, but also in its power to receive them. A keen observer of Victorian society would be watching for these silent cues, deciphering the subtle language, and responding in kind. It created a dynamic, nonverbal dialogue that ran parallel to the polite conversations about the weather or the latest opera. It was like having a secret channel broadcasting right alongside the public one. This hidden world of communication also added a layer of excitement and intrigue to social gatherings. Imagine the thrill of deciphering a message from someone you admired, or the satisfaction of subtly conveying your own feelings without fear of direct repercussion. It made social interaction a high-stakes game, a puzzle to be solved, and the fan was your most powerful piece. So, as you prepare to dive into the specifics of these fan gestures, understand that you're not just learning a historical curiosity. You're peeking behind the curtain of an entire society, witnessing how human beings, constrained by strict rules, found ingenious and elegant ways to express their most personal thoughts and desires. The Victorian fan, therefore, is not merely a pretty object. It is a profound testament to the enduring power of nonverbal communication, born from a need for expression in an era that demanded silence. You've absorbed the strictures of Victorian society and understood how the folding fan became the perfect vessel for covert communication. Now, you're finally ready to truly learn the fan's silent alphabet, to understand the precise gestures and movements that formed the core vocabulary of this secret language. This isn't just about pretty fluttering, it's about a meticulously choreographed dance of hands and fans. Each movement a carefully chosen word in a silent conversation. Imagine yourself, fan in hand, ready to navigate the intricate social landscape. The key to this language lay in its subtlety. No grand, sweeping gestures. Instead, tiny, almost imperceptible movements conveyed profound meaning. This mainstream historical fact, the existence of published fan codes, provides a fascinating glimpse into the Victorians' earnest attempt to standardize this elusive communication. Etiquette manuals and ladies' magazines often included diagrams and descriptions of various fan movements and their purported meanings. It was like a crash course in silent flirtation for the aspiring socialite. Let's begin with some of the basics. The hello and goodbye of fan language. If you will. Carrying the fan in the right hand in front of the face. This was often interpreted as follow me, a bold invitation, perhaps from a lady keen to slip away from a crowded room for a more private tete-a-tete. Carrying the fan in the left hand in front of the face, the opposite, and equally clear. I desire acquaintance, a less direct invitation than follow me, but still a distinct signal of interest. Dropping the fan. This was a classic, and perhaps one of the most recognizable gestures, often meaning we are friends, or a subtle I trust you. It could also, of course, simply mean clumsiness, which highlights the inherent ambiguity of the language. More on that later. Fanning slowly. The languid pace. This usually signaled I am married, or I am engaged, or simply I am uninterested, or I wish to convey that my social standing prohibits flirtation. It suggested a calm, settled state, or a deliberate disengagement. Fanning quickly. A rapid, almost agitated flutter of the fan. In stark contrast, often meant I am engaged, but more likely implied I am interested or I am excited. It betrayed a heightened state of emotion, a quickening pulse, a desire for attention. Now, let's delve deeper into the more nuanced and playful aspects of the language. The building blocks for flirtation and deeper connection. Touching. The tip of the fan to the lips. This was a delicate, intimate gesture, signaling I want to kiss you. Imagine the sheer daring of such a message, conveyed so openly, yet so subtly. Drawing the fan across the cheek. This could be I love you, a gentle caress in miniature. Or, if done more abruptly, I am married, engaged, as if brushing away unwanted. Advances, again. Context was king. Half opening the fan and holding it over the nose. A rather direct, yet still silent, declaration. You are my best beloved. Holding the fan open and resting it on the left ear. This was a request for secrecy. A whispered, do not betray me. Opening and closing the fan repeatedly. This frantic movement typically conveyed you are cruel or you are teasing me. The fan shut. This was a polite but firm no. Here's a quirky tidbit you might not expect. Not all fan messages were romantic. Some were purely practical. For example, a lady might hold her fan to her left ear to ask someone to change your seat, or drawing it across her forehead might mean we are watched. Imagine the clandestine meetings, the hushed gossip exchanged through a series of fan movements, warning of an approaching chaperone or a nosy relative. It turns dining room conversations into a silent espionage mission. This highlights how the language adapted to the broader social needs of the time, not just the romantic ones. Historians still argue whether the entirety of these published fan codes was genuinely practiced and widely understood by all levels of Victorian society, or if many of them were merely fanciful inventions by etiquette writers, hoping to sell more books. While the core gestures, like fanning slowly, quickly, or dropping the fan certainly seem to have been common parlance, the more obscure or highly specific gestures might have been less universal, relying more on a private understanding between two individuals. It's plausible that, much like modern slang, some terms were popular, others niche, and many fell out of use. The very act of holding and manipulating the fan was part of the message. The angle, the speed, the hand used all contributed to the nuance. A fan held perfectly still could signify attention, while a fan slowly closing might convey boredom or a desire for the conversation to end. The fan wasn't just an object. It was a dynamic extension of the body, capable of an astonishing range of expression. Consider the skill involved. To use the fan language effectively, A lady needed not only to know the meanings, but also to execute the gestures with grace and subtlety. An awkward or overly dramatic movement could ruin the illusion of casual fanning and expose the true intent. This required practice, poise, and an acute awareness of one's surroundings. It was a performance, a silent play, enacted in every social gathering. You can almost feel the air thick with unspoken desires and polite rejections. A gentleman might be watching a lady across the room, desperately hoping for a sign of encouragement. He might initiate with a subtle bow and then wait, his eyes fixed on her fan. Will it flutter quickly, indicating interest, or will it be fanned slowly, signaling indifference? The tension would be palpable, the entire social scene transformed into a silent battleground of wills and desires. The fan also served as a convenient prop for nervous energy. Instead of fidgeting, a lady could discreetly adjust her fan, and in doing so, send a meaningful message. It allowed for controlled expression in a society that valued control above all else. This duality, appearing composed while secretly communicating, was the true genius of the fan's secret language. However, the ambiguity of the fan language also presented its own set of challenges. A gesture intended as a playful flirtation might be misinterpreted as a firm rejection, leading to awkward encounters or missed opportunities. This risk was part of the game, adding to its allure and its potential for drama. Of a gentleman who misread "I love you" as "I wish to be rid of you," all because of a slightly different angle or speed. As you conclude this section, recognize that the silent alphabet of the fan wasn't just a quaint historical curiosity. It was a testament to human ingenuity in overcoming social obstacles. In a world where words were often constrained, the fan provided a powerful, elegant, and often subversive means of self-expression. It turned every ball, every gathering, into a stage where a silent, intricate drama played out, known only to those initiated into its fascinating secrets. You now hold the key to understanding these whispered conversations, seeing through the polite veneer to the vibrant, emotional currents flowing beneath. You've now got a grasp of the fan's silent alphabet, recognizing that each movement, however slight, carried a coded meaning. Now, imagine putting that knowledge into practice in the most thrilling and often nerve-wracking arena of Victorian social life, the ballroom. This is where the fan truly shone as an indispensable tool for flirting with folds and flutters, allowing discreet courtship and romantic communication to blossom under the watchful eyes of society. Picture the scene: a grand ball, chandeliers sparkling, music swelling, and couples whirling across the polished floor. Amidst the polite conversation and carefully orchestrated movements, a silent drama unfolds. A young lady, perhaps you, spies a gentleman across the room. He's charming, perhaps a little daring, and you've been hoping for an opportunity to exchange more than just pleasantries. This is where your fan becomes your co-conspirator, your silent messenger of affection. The very act of carrying a fan at a ball was a statement. It was a required accessory for any lady of standing. But the way you carried it, the way you used it, that was the art. A fan held perfectly still, perhaps clutched tightly, might signal nervousness or disinterest. A fan slowly opened and closed, however, could be a gentle invitation. You might give a gentleman a fleeting glance, Then subtly draw your fan across your lips, a clear, if silent, "I want to kiss you." The thrill for both parties lay in the secrecy, the shared understanding of a message that was hidden in plain sight. One of the most common and widely recognized flirtatious gestures was the slow fanning. Remember how we discussed it could mean "I am married, engaged"? Well, in the context of a flirtation, if the lady was unmarried and she fanned herself slowly, it could convey a deliberate calm, a sense of "I am available, but I am observing you," with composure and interest. It invited the gentleman to approach, not with a rush, but with a respectful, considered advance. It was a signal of elegant restraint, suggesting depth rather than impulsiveness. Conversely, the rapid fanning was the visual equivalent of a quickened heartbeat. If a gentleman had just paid a compliment, or if his presence excited you, a rapid flutter of the fan could signal "I am interested" or "I am excited." It was a burst of silent enthusiasm, letting him know his efforts were not unnoticed, perhaps even reciprocated. It was a delicate balance, though, too frantic, and it could look like agitation or a desperate plea for attention, rather than subtle interest. The beauty was in the nuanced speed. Consider the fan placed on the right cheek. This was a clear message of yes. Imagine a gentleman approaching, having perhaps sent a previous fan signal, or even just a meaningful glance. You, the lady, subtly raise your fan, touching it lightly to your right cheek. It's an affirmation, a green light, for him to continue his suit, to perhaps engage you in conversation, or even request a dance. It was an encouragement that saved both parties the potential embarrassment of a direct rejection. On the flip side, the fan placed on the left cheek was an equally clear no, a gentle but firm dismissal, allowing the lady to politely decline, an unspoken overture without uttering a single word. This was particularly useful in a society where direct rejection could be seen as rude or unladylike. The fan offered a graceful escape route, a way to maintain decorum while still being unequivocally understood. This mainstream historical fact, the use of the fan for both acceptance and rejection, highlights its utility in navigating the delicate dance of courtship. A more direct, almost audacious signal was opening the fan wide and presenting it to the gentleman. This was often interpreted as "wait for me" or "I am waiting for you." Imagine the courage it took for a lady to subtly convey such an overt desire for a private meeting. It spoke volumes about her interest and her willingness to bend the strict rules of engagement, even if just slightly. Here's a quirky tidbit that demonstrates the playful complexity. The fan resting on the heart was a deeply romantic gesture, almost exclusively meaning "my love for you grows." But combine that with a slight tremble of the hand, and it could convey nervousness, excitement, or even fear. It's the kind of subtle addition that could only be understood between two people who were deeply attuned to each other, a private nuance within the public code. It hints at the idea that while there were published codes, true mastery of the fan language lay in these personalized, almost imperceptible flourishes. Historians still argue whether the fan language was primarily a tool for genuine emotional expression or more of a fashionable game played for amusement within the confines of rigid social rules. Was it a heartfelt connection or merely a sophisticated flirtation? It's likely a bit of both. For some, it was undoubtedly a genuine outlet for repressed emotions. a way to forge authentic connections. For others, it might have been simply a delightful pastime, a way to add spice to an otherwise predictable social season. The beauty is that it served both purposes. The fan also played a crucial role in managing the approach and retreat of courtship. If a gentleman was becoming too forward, or if a chaperone was looking too keenly, a lady could discreetly close the fan abruptly to signal "I do not like you" or "stop." Conversely, a slow, deliberate closing of the fan might mean "I wish to end this conversation" or "I am leaving." These were powerful nonverbal cues that allowed a lady to control the pace and direction of an interaction without resorting to a direct, potentially impolite verbal confrontation. Think about the sheer artistry involved for both parties. The gentleman had to be acutely observant, not just of the lady's words, but of her hands, her posture, the almost imperceptible movements of her fan. And the lady had to be a master of subtlety, able to execute gestures with grace and precision, ensuring her message was received by the intended recipient and no one else. It was a high-stakes game of observation and performance, adding layers of intrigue to every social interaction. The fan also offered a buffer, a physical barrier that could be used to create distance or to invite closeness. Holding the fan partially open to block your face could indicate "I am shy" or "I am trying to conceal my feelings." But a quick peek over the top of the fan, followed by a slight lowering, could be a powerful invitation, a fleeting glimpse that promised more. Even the way a fan was held in the hand, whether tightly or loosely, could convey meaning. A tightly clutched fan might suggest anxiety or a desire to suppress emotion. A loosely held fan, allowing it to swing gently, might signal a relaxed demeanor and openness to conversation. These weren't explicit codes, but rather subtle cues that added texture to the main messages. The fan wasn't just for women either. While it was predominantly a female accessory for overt flirtation, gentlemen too could use their fans, though less common or more subtly. Acknowledge a fan message with their own body language or equally discreet objects, like a glove or a handkerchief. The fan initiated a dialogue, and the response could come in many forms, creating a rich tapestry of nonverbal exchange. In essence, the fan in Victorian courtship was a silent orchestrator of desire, a mediator of social boundaries. It allowed for the expression of profound emotions, love, interest, rejection, shyness, without violating the strict rules of propriety. It transformed polite society into a thrilling game of silent signals, a constant decoding and encoding of intentions. You can almost hear the unsaid words, the silent sighs, the subtle triumphs and disappointments playing out with every flutter and fold. It reveals a world where communication was an art form, perfected not through booming speeches, but through the delicate whisper of a fan. You've now mastered the art of romantic communication with the fan. But to truly appreciate its versatility, you must understand that its language extended far beyond mere flirtation. Imagine a world where every public interaction was filtered through a sieve of propriety. In such a world, the fan became an invaluable tool for conveying a surprising range of everyday messages, from the mundane to the urgent, allowing Victorians to communicate discreetly without drawing undue attention or breaking social norms. Think about the sheer practicality of it. You're at a bustling social event, perhaps a crowded garden party or a drawing room filled with chatter. You need to convey something to a friend or acquaintance, but shouting across the room is unthinkable, and a direct approach might be impossible without alerting a prying ear. The fan steps in as your silent aid. This mainstream historical fact that the fan was used for practical, non-romantic communication broadens our understanding of its societal role. It wasn't just a lover's telegraph, it was a daily convenience. Let's explore some of these more utilitarian signals. The fan held to the left ear, while it could be a request for secrecy. In romantic contexts, in a general setting, it often meant change your seat. Imagine needing to discreetly ask a friend to move closer to you, perhaps to share a private joke or to escape a tedious conversational partner. A subtle movement of the fan to the left ear, followed by a glance, could convey this perfectly. Drawing the fan across the forehead, this was a signal of distress or warning. We are watched, or be careful. If a chaperone was approaching, or if a sensitive conversation was overheard, this quick, almost absent-minded gesture could immediately alert your confederate to the danger without a word being spoken. The feigned absent-mindedness made it difficult for others to detect the true meaning. The fan held in the left hand and closed, a simple yet effective "come speak to me." This was less about flirtation and more about initiating a direct conversation, perhaps to discuss plans or share information. It avoided the awkwardness of a direct summons and allowed the other party to approach at their convenience, making it appear as if they simply decided to join you. The fan resting on the right arm. This could mean "I desire to get rid of you," a polite but firm dismissal without a direct insult. This was particularly useful for a lady besieged by an overly persistent or tiresome suitor. She could maintain her composure and a facade of politeness while silently sending him packing, opening and closing the fan slowly several times. This signal indicated you are cruel or you are unkind. Perhaps a friend had inadvertently snubbed you, or a companion had made a cutting remark. This silent reproach allowed you to express your hurt without escalating the situation into a public scene. Touching the fan with a finger. This seemingly innocuous gesture could mean "I wish to speak with you." It was a subtle invitation for a more private conversation, perhaps in a quieter corner of the room or at a later, more convenient time. Here's a quirky tidbit about the fan's practical use. It could even be used to comment on the quality of an event. A lady might discreetly fan herself with exaggerated slowness, almost to a standstill, to signal "this is boring," or "I'm quite dull." Conversely, a subtle, energetic flutter, not necessarily rapid, might convey "this is delightful," or "I'm enjoying myself immensely." These were conversational shorthand, silent annotations on the social experience, shared only with those in the know. It's like a Victorian version of a private emoji reaction. Historians still argue whether these non-romantic fan signals were as widely documented and understood as the flirtatious ones. While the romantic gestures often found their way into popular etiquette guides, the more pragmatic signals may have been largely informal, developed organically within social circles. It's plausible that many practical fan gestures were context-dependent or agreed upon privately between individuals, making them more like inside jokes than formalized language. The beauty of these everyday messages was their ability to maintain social harmony. Victorian society placed immense value on avoiding conflict and maintaining appearances. The fan allowed for communication that bypassed direct confrontation or awkwardness. You could express displeasure, give a warning, or issue an invitation without ever breaking the polite facade. This made social gatherings flow more smoothly, even as a hidden stream of information flowed beneath the surface. Consider a scenario. You are discussing a sensitive topic with a friend, perhaps a piece of gossip, when you spot an eavesdropper approaching. Instead of abruptly changing the subject or whispering, which would draw attention, you subtly draw your fan across your forehead. Your friend immediately understands, smoothly shifting the conversation to a more innocuous topic about the weather or the latest fashions. This seamless transition, facilitated by the fan, maintained decorum and protected your private conversation. The fan also proved useful for sharing quick observations or reactions. A slight flick of the fan towards a particular person might mean, "Look at that person," or "He, she is interesting." A gentle wave of the fan might signal, "I agree," or "Yes." These weren't profound statements, but rather the subtle nods and winks that pepper everyday conversation, allowing for shared understanding without breaking the polite flow. Even signaling boredom or exhaustion could be achieved with the fan. A fan slowly closing and then held still for a long moment could be a subtle cue to a companion that you are ready to depart, or that you are simply weary of the conversation. It was a less direct, and thus more polite, way of indicating discomfort, or a desire to leave, than overtly yawning or excusing oneself too abruptly. The effectiveness of these everyday messages lay in their blend of invisibility and clarity, at least to the intended recipient. To an outsider, you were simply fanning yourself or adjusting your fan. To your confidant, you were communicating a vital piece of information. It required both the sender and the receiver to be acutely observant and attuned to each other's movements, reinforcing the bond between them. You can almost feel the collective sighs of relief the fan must have prompted. It offered a silent escape valve for the pressures of Victorian life, a way to navigate the social maze with grace and efficiency. It turned public spaces into private communication channels, transforming seemingly simple accessories into sophisticated instruments of social navigation. The Victorian fan, therefore, was not just about romance. It was about survival, about making the rigid world of polite society a little more bearable, a little more efficient, and a lot more interesting. It's a testament to human ingenuity that even in the most restrictive environments, people will find a way to connect, to express, and to whisper secrets just beyond the reach of those who would enforce silence. You've now seen how the fan, in its own right, was a powerful communicative tool. But imagine, for a moment, that the fan wasn't acting alone. In the intricate ballet of Victorian social interaction, it often had a supporting cast of equally significant, though perhaps less verbose, accessories. You're about to discover how these other elements complemented the fan, aiding in its silent communication and adding layers to the overall mystique of Victorian nonverbal messaging. It was a symphony of subtle signals where the fan played the lead, but other props provided the crucial harmony. Think of the Victorian ladies' ensemble, not just the gown, but the gloves, the parasol, the handkerchief, the calling card case, perhaps even a strategically placed flower. Each of these items, seemingly innocuous, could be pressed into service as an extension of the fan's silent language, or even as a message carrier in its own right. This mainstream historical fact, the significance of various accessories in Victorian communication, underscores the era's pervasive emphasis on coded interactions. Let's start with the handkerchief. This seemingly simple piece of cloth, often delicately embroidered or edged with lace, was a surprisingly versatile prop. While its primary purpose was practical and sometimes, for a delicate lady, for smelling salts, it could convey a multitude of meanings. Twirling the handkerchief in the right hand, this could be a playful "I love another," a gentle dismissal, or a signal of flirtatious disinterest. Twirling it in the left hand, a more serious warning: "I am engaged," or "I wish to be rid of you." Dropping the handkerchief, like dropping the fan, this could be an invitation for a gentleman to pick it up, signaling "I desire your company," or "I wish to speak." Touching the nose with the handkerchief, this was often a sign of "my feelings are engaged," a subtle expression of sentiment without direct declaration. Drawing the handkerchief across the lips, this was akin to the fan gesture, implying "I am desirous of a kiss." The handkerchief, unlike the fan, didn't have the same dynamic range of movement, but its small size and constant presence made it ideal for quick, almost imperceptible signals. Imagine a lady subtly drawing her handkerchief across her cheek after a compliment, echoing the fan's gesture for "I love you," but with an added layer of intimacy due to its proximity to the skin. Next, consider the parasol. While its primary function was to shield delicate complexions from the sun, a true Victorian obsession, as tanned skin was associated with manual labor, it too could become a silent communicator. Twirling the parasol, this could be a sign of impatience or boredom, a gentle "hurry up," or "this conversation is dull." Holding the parasol high, a signal of confidence or even haughtiness, conveying "I am above this." Letting the parasol hang loosely, a sign of relaxation or openness. Tapping the ground with the parasol, a gentle way to draw attention or indicate a desire to move on. A quirky tidbit that illustrates the intricate nature of these combined signals. A lady might hold her fan open to signal yes, but then, with a subtle shift, tap the ground with her parasol, adding "but hurry, we are watched." It was a multi-layered communication, a silent conversation rich with nuance, understood only by those truly fluent in the subtle language of Victorian props. Historians still argue whether the complexity of these combined signals was truly universal, or if many were merely aspirational, practiced only by the most dedicated flirts and observers. Then there were the gloves, almost always worn outdoors, and frequently indoors in formal settings. Gloves offered their own opportunities for silent messaging. Taking off a glove, this was a surprisingly intimate gesture, signifying "I wish to be friends," or "I am comfortable with you." The act of removing a glove implied a shedding of formality, a step towards greater familiarity. Flicking a glove at someone, a playful or even slightly impudent "I defy you," or "I challenge you." Placing a glove on the cheek, this could be a gesture of sadness or contemplation, a silent "I am thinking of you." Even seemingly trivial items, like calling card cases or opera glasses, could play a role. A gentleman might subtly tap his calling card case to indicate, "I will call on you." Or a lady might deliberately direct her opera glasses at someone across the theater to draw their attention, then perform a fan gesture to convey a specific message. The possibilities were endless, limited only by ingenuity and the conventions of the moment. The very act of wearing or arranging a flower could also carry meaning, the aforementioned florography. A rose for love, a forget-me-not for remembrance. If a fan was adorned with a specific flower, or if a lady held a fan in one hand and a significant flower in the other, it added another layer of silent poetry to her communication. Imagine a fan fluttering "I love you," while a red rose pinned to the lady's bodice silently screamed the same message. Historians still argue about the extent to which these multiple accessory codes were consciously coordinated by individuals, or if they simply emerged organically from social practice. Was there a grand, unified system, or were they more like separate, overlapping dialects? It's likely that a sophisticated communicator would be aware of the interplay, using each accessory to reinforce or add nuance to the overall message, creating a rich tapestry of nonverbal cues. The beauty of this supporting cast was its ability to create a full, rich nonverbal dialogue. The fan might give the primary message, but the handkerchief could add emphasis, the parasol a warning, and the flower a romantic flourish. It was like building a silent sentence, word by word, gesture by gesture, each prop contributing to the overall meaning. This demanded immense observational skills from both sender and receiver. You weren't just watching a fan. You were observing an entire person, scanning their posture, their hands, their every subtle interaction with their accessories. This elaborate system of communication also served a psychological purpose. In an era where expressing true feelings was often frowned upon, these accessories provided a safe outlet, a controlled way to reveal emotion without risking social censure. It was a game, yes, but a game with real stakes: marriage, social standing, reputation. You can almost feel the weight of these expectations, the constant need for vigilance and interpretation. A Victorian social gathering wasn't just a place for polite conversation. It was a complex field of hidden signals, where every prop, every gesture, carried potential meaning. The fan might have been the star, but its supporting cast of accessories ensured that the silent language of Victorian society was rich, complex, and utterly captivating. It reveals a world where silence was anything but empty, brimming instead with whispers, warnings, and desires, all conveyed with the most exquisite subtlety. You've delved into the intricacies of the fan's silent alphabet and explored how other Victorian accessories joined the communicative chorus. Now, with all this potential for nuanced expression, it's crucial to confront a significant challenge: the inherent difficulties and potential for misinterpretation within such a nuanced, nonverbal system. Imagine the agony of a missed signal, the confusion of a mixed message, or the heartbreak of a completely misread intention. The fan, as we discussed, it could mean "we are friends," or "I trust you," or even "I desire your company." Even in the Victorian era, despite their penchant for grace, the potential for an accidental signal or an intentional signal mistaken for an accident was ever present, only to be met with a confused or annoyed look from the lady, who was genuinely just clumsy, awkward. This highlights the delicate tightrope walk of Victorian communication. Unlike spoken words, which can be clarified with a follow-up question, "Did you mean?" or "Could you repeat that?" Their prior understanding, and even the ambient mood of the room, all played a crucial role in deciphering the true meaning. Without these unwritten variables, a simple gesture could become utterly perplexing. Here's a quirky tidbit about misinterpretation. There are accounts, often anecdotal, of gentlemen being entirely too presumptuous based on a perceived fan signal. One story tells of a suitor who convinced a lady's rapid fanning meant "I love you," as she was merely fanning herself because the room was stiflingly hot. The ensuing embarrassment for both parties would have been legendary within their social circle. Corroborating evidence. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of these fan codes led to more or fewer social misunderstandings. Did the system provide a graceful means of communication, or did its inherent ambiguity lead to greater confusion and heartbreak? It's a compelling debate. Other hand, it introduced a layer of interpretive risk that spoken language, for all its flaws, often mitigates. Think about the subjective nature of interpretation. What one person perceived as a slow fan movement, another might consider normal. The subtle differences in speed, angle, or placement were often crucial. A few degrees off, a fraction of a second too long, and the message could be completely altered. This wasn't a digital code with clear-cut binaries. It was an analog system full of shades of gray. Moreover, the fan language wasn't universally taught or adopted. While etiquette books published codes, there was no central authority enforcing them. Different social circles, different regions, and even different families might have developed their own variations or emphasized certain gestures over others. This lack of standardization meant that a gesture understood perfectly in one drawing room might be completely alien, or worse, misinterpreted in another. It was a communication system prone to dialectical differences and personal variations. The emotional state of the sender and receiver also heavily influenced interpretation. A hopeful receiver might see a positive message where none was intended. Conversely, a cynical receiver might dismiss a genuine overture as mere politeness. Confirmation bias, the tendency to interpret information in a way that confirms one's preconceptions, crystal clear in their own mind. But if the perception of the receiver is skewed, the message fails. "It, as I am shy, do not approach." A missed connection was inevitable. The beauty of the system was also its fatal flaw, its reliance on interpretation. The social ramifications of misinterpretation could be significant. A lady might inadvertently send an "I love you" signal to the wrong person, leading to awkward advances from an unwanted suitor. The stakes were high, as reputation and social standing were paramount in Victorian society. Language could have tangible, negative consequences. The very act of being in the know about the fan language could also contribute to misinterpretation. Those who fancied themselves masters of the code might be more prone to seeing messages where none existed, eager to apply their knowledge. Conversely, those unfamiliar might ignore perfectly clear signals, dismissing them as random movements. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy of communication breakdown for both the overly confident and the utterly ignorant. Historians still argue whether the true purpose of the fan language was primarily to facilitate communication or to restrict it, adding another layer of complexity to social interaction. that favored the witty and observant few? Was it a tool of liberation or another form of social control, ensuring only the most adept could navigate its currents? More about reinforcing existing social hierarchies by creating a barrier to entry for the moment of sending the agonizing wait for a response. The careful observation of the receiver's reaction and the constant self-doubt. Did they understand? Did I do it right? It adds a layer of delightful drama to what might seem, on the surface, to be merely polite social gatherings. Ultimately, the challenges of interpretation underscore the ephemeral nature of the fan's secret language. It was a living, breathing, constantly evolving system, susceptible to individual idiosyncrasies, contextual nuances, and the ever-present possibility of human error. It was imperfect, subject to the delightful, frustrating meances of human interaction. You've wrestled with the ambiguities of the fan's silent whispers. You're about to explore the artistry and meticulous craftsmanship involved in creating these intricate objects, and discover some of the notable fan makers and their masterpieces that graced the hands of Victorian society. Mass-produced items. Many were miniature works of art, reflecting the aesthetic sensibilities and technological advancements of the era. The production of a high-quality fan was a complex, multi-stage process, often involving a collaboration of highly specialized artisans. This mainstream historical fact, the division of labor in fan manufacturing, highlights the sophistication of the industry. It wasn't just one person crafting a fan. Consider the sticks or montour, the structural skeleton of the folding fan. Ivory, often sourced from African elephants, a somber thought in retrospect. Tortoiseshell, horn, sandalwood, and various exotic woods were also used, often floral motifs, mythological scenes, or delicate filigree. Polishers would then bring the surface to a high sheen, preparing it for assembly. Imagine the patience and precision required, often working with tiny tools under magnification, to create designs so fine they looked almost impossibly delicate. Next came the leaf. This was typically made from silk, satin, paper, often high-quality vellum, or lace. Pastoral landscapes, romantic encounters, or popular contemporary events. Some fans even featured hand-painted portraits or allegorical figures. The quality of the painting could elevate a fan from a mere accessory to a cherished heirloom. Engravers also played a significant role, creating designs that could be printed onto paper leaves, allowing for more widespread production and intricate detail. Lace makers would apply exquisite lace, sometimes layered over painted silk, adding texture and ethereal beauty. This combination of painting, printing, and textile work made each fan a unique artistic statement. The assembly process, bringing the sticks and the leaf together, required immense skill. The leaf had to be perfectly pleated and meticulously attached to each stick, ensuring it folded smoothly and opened into a perfect arc, or button, sometimes studded with a small gemstone. The final result was a harmonious blend of structure and decoration, form and function. Now for some notable fan makers and their workshops. While many artisans operated anonymously, certain names and regions became synonymous with quality. France, particularly Paris, was considered the unrivaled center of fan production. Parisian Evangelist's fan makers were celebrated for their exquisite designs, superior craftsmanship, and innovative techniques. Houses like de Villeroy, founded in 1827, became legendary. They produced fans for royalty and the highest echelons of society. A thriving fan industry. Firms like R&F4 were prominent in the Victorian era, producing high-quality fans that competed with their French counterparts. While perhaps less overtly flamboyant than some French designs, English fans often emphasized intricate piercing on the sticks and refined painting on the leaves. The English fan often reflected a more subdued elegance, aligning with Victorian sensibilities of understated wealth. A quirky tidbit related to the fan-making industry. Manufacturers began to experiment with more cost-effective production methods. This included the use of lithography for printing designs on paper leaves, allowing for mass production of more affordable fans. These common fans, while lacking the bespoke artistry of their high-end counterparts, played a crucial role in making the fan, and by extension, its secret language, accessible to a broader segment of the middle class. So, while the high society lady might possess a hand-painted silk masterpiece, fan, not just for practical purposes, but for social communication. Historians still argue whether the increased industrialization of fan production diluted the artistry and symbolism of the fan, or if it simply broadened its reach and adaptability. Two different social strata. Did the accessibility of cheaper fans diminish the mystique of the secret language, or did it merely spread its use to more people, making it even more pervasive? Was also a canvas for innovation. Artists experimented with new materials and techniques. Some fans incorporated mirrors into their design, allowing a lady to discreetly check her appearance or even catch a glimpse of someone behind her. Others featured hidden compartments for tiny lockets or perfume. These subtle innovations added to the fan's allure and its utility as a communicative device. Beyond the major centers, smaller fan makers flourished across Europe, each contributing to the diverse styles and techniques. Spanish fans, for instance, were often known for their vibrant colors and more passionate designs, reflecting their cultural heritage. Could be chosen not just for its beauty or its communicative potential, but also for its provenance and the story of its creation. You can almost hear the soft rustle of silk and the gentle click of ivory as you imagine these beautiful objects being crafted, each one a testament to human skill, patience, and an enduring desire for beauty and expression. Mastery required to create them was as significant as the mastery required to wield them in the intricate dance of Victorian social life. You're beginning to see the fan not just as an object, but as a living piece of history, breathing with the artistry and the secrets of its makers. You've explored the meticulous craftsmanship that brought these silent communicators to life. Victorian culture. You're about to discover how the silent language of the fan resonated through art and literature, reflecting its widespread influence and cementing its place as a powerful symbol in the popular imagination of the era. Fan wasn't just a physical object. It was a character, a plot device, and a visual metaphor, subtly woven into the narratives and imagery that defined the age. Think about the countless, sometimes partially open, sometimes poised as if in mid. This isn't accidental. These artists, aware of the fan's communicative power. Fact is that portraiture during this period often used symbolic objects to convey deeper meanings, and the fan was a prime example. A closed fan might suggest demureness, while a fan held playfully might hint at a flirtatious nature. The painting captured a frozen moment of communication, allowing viewers to read the fan and infer the sitter's unspoken thoughts or intentions. In genre paintings, which depicted scenes of everyday life, the fan frequently appears as a central element in social interactions. You might see a painting of a garden party, with figures subtly exchanging glances, and a lady in the foreground holding her fan in a specific way, hinting at a secret conversation unfolding. Artists reveled in the ambiguity and intrigue the fan offered, allowing them to suggest complex human dramas without explicit depiction. It invited the viewer to become a silent observer, to decipher the hidden currents of attraction, rejection, or boredom playing out before them. Now, let's turn to literature, where the fan truly came alive in the imaginations of Victorian readers. Novelists, poets, and playwrights were acutely aware of the fan's communicative potential and create dramatic tension. Consider the drawing room dramas and romantic novels that were so popular. A character might enter a scene, and the first detail given about a lady might be the way she handles her fan. A flutter of the fan could signal agitation, a slow wave, boredom, a deliberate closing, a dismissal. The author didn't need to explicitly state the character's feelings. The fan did the talking. For instance, in a scene of polite but tense conversation, a novel might describe a lady nervously fluttering her fan, immediately conveying her anxiety without the need for exposition. Or a dashing hero might interpret a coyly half-opened fan as an invitation, driving the plot forward based on a silent signal. The fan became a shorthand for emotion, a visual cue for the reader to understand the unspoken subtext of a scene. A quirky tidbit is or misinterpretation. They might describe a character whose attempts at fan communication were utterly clumsy, leading to hilarious misunderstandings. Flick and fold, missing the actual spoken conversation around her. These humorous depictions, while exaggerated, demonstrate how widely recognized and still argue whether the literary depictions of the fan language were an accurate reflection of its widespread use, or whether authors exaggerated its significance for dramatic effect. Was every Victorian lady truly a master of this silent art, or did writers amplify its role to add intrigue to their narratives? It's likely a bit of both. Literature often reflects and shapes reality simultaneously. The very act of writing about the fan language would have further popularized its concept, perhaps even encouraging more people to attempt its mastery. The fan also served as a powerful metaphor. It represented concealment and revelation, the public persona versus the private self. Just as the fan could open to reveal intricate beauty and then close to hide it. Double standards, its emphasis on appearance over raw feeling, in poetry, or praise a coy fan that cleverly managed a difficult social situation. These poetic interpretations elevated the fan beyond a mere object, granting it a soul and agency within the narrative. Even in popular music and stage plays, the fan made appearances. Actresses would use fans to convey emotions on stage, a visual shorthand that audiences accustomed to the silent language would instantly recognize. A play might feature a dramatic moment centered around a misread fan signal of the time. These depictions further cemented its image as an elegant, romantic, and subtly powerful accessory. It was everywhere, a constant reminder of the intricate dance of Victorian social life and the hidden currents of communication that flowed beneath its polished surface. You can almost feel the presence of the fan in every polite social interaction depicted in Victorian art and literature. It's not just a prop. Are forbidden. The enduring popularity of stories and imagery featuring the fan. It transcended its practical function to become a cultural icon, synonymous with grace, mystery, and the exquisite art of the unspoken. Identity, a silent testament to the ingenuity of a society that perfected the art of saying everything without uttering a single word. You've witnessed the fan's powerful role in Victorian art and literature, a testament to its cultural ubiquity. But like all trends, even the most elegant and ingenious, the secret language of the fan eventually began to fade. You're now entering the twilight years of the Victorian era and beyond to explore the factors that led to the gradual decline of the secret language of the fan, as the rigid social climate that fostered it slowly began to dissipate. Imagine the turn of the 20th century. The gears of society are grinding, slowly but surely, towards modernity. The suffocating corsets are loosening, literal and metaphorical. Women are beginning to gain more independence, finding their voices in public spheres, and the rules of polite society, while still influential, are losing some of their iron grip. This mainstream historical fact, the gradual liberalization of social norms, and the increasing autonomy of women in the late Victorian and Edwardian eras is the primary reason the fan's silent language began to wither. The very conditions that allowed the fan language to flourish, the intense formality, the repression of direct expression, the need for discreet communication, were slowly eroding. As society became less rigid, people found less need for such elaborate codes. Why communicate through a series of subtle gestures with a fan when you could simply engage in more direct, open conversation? The necessity, the raison d'etre for the secret language diminished. The shift in fashion also played a significant role, as the silhouette of women's clothing became less voluminous and more streamlined, particularly after the Edwardian era and into the Roaring Twenties. The large, elaborate fans began to seem less fitting. Practicality gained ground over elaborate display. Imagine trying to wield a massive feather fan while doing the Charleston. It just doesn't quite fit the vibe, does it? The rise of new technologies and forms of entertainment also diverted attention away from the subtle art of fan communication. The telephone, while still nascent in the late Victorian period, promised a future of instantaneous and direct verbal communication over distances. The advent of cinema and phonographs offered new forms of public entertainment that were more engaging and less reliant on audience participation in subtle social games. People found other ways to amuse themselves and connect, less dependent on deciphering elaborate. Later, the foxtrot, which involved closer physical proximity and more direct interaction between partners, also contributed to the decline. When you're intimately gliding across a dance floor with someone, holding a conversation is much easier than trying to convey complex messages with a fan. The physical closeness bypassed the need for subtle fan signals, making them somewhat redundant. In those moments of intimate connection, the very nature of social interaction became more direct, reducing the need for elaborate subterfuge. Historians still argue whether the decline of the fan language was a symptom of a broader loss of elegance and refinement in society, or simply a natural evolution as communication became more direct and efficient. Was it a regrettable loss of a beautiful art form, or a welcome step towards more open and honest interaction? It's likely a perspective that depends on individual values. Some romanticize the lost art, while others see it as an antiquated system that no longer served a purpose. The very knowledge of the fan language also began to wane. As new generations grew up in a less restrictive environment, the specific gestures and their meanings were no longer passed down with the same diligence. Etiquette books, while still offering advice on manners, gradually reduced their focus on detailed fan codes, reflecting their diminishing relevance. It became a specialized knowledge known to fewer and fewer people, rather than a widely understood social tool. The mass production of fans, while making them accessible, also contributed to the decline of their perceived mystique. When a fan was a rare, handcrafted masterpiece, it commanded respect and attention. When simpler, cheaper paper fans became ubiquitous, they lost some of their aura as special, coded objects. The very democracy of the fan, in a way, eroded its aristocratic secret. World War I played a significant, albeit indirect, role in accelerating the decline. The war dramatically reshaped social structures, gender roles, and societal priorities. The frivolous elegance of pre-war Victorian society seemed out of place in a world grappling with immense loss and profound social upheaval. Women took on new roles, often working outside the home, and the focus shifted from drawing room etiquette to more pressing matters of survival and societal reconstruction. The fan, as a symbol of leisurely coded communication, simply didn't fit the new, grittier reality. After the war, the Roaring Twenties ushered in an era of unprecedented social liberation, particularly for women. Flappers, with their short skirts, bobbed hair, and open defiance of traditional norms, had no need for a clandestine fan language. They preferred direct speech, bold statements, and uninhibited expression. Became a quaint relic of a bygone era, like the whalebone corset or the elaborate bustle. You can almost feel the changing winds of social change, blowing away the delicate whispers of the fan. It wasn't a sudden death, but a gradual fading, a slow obsolescence as society moved on to new ways of interacting. The fan itself remained. Of course, people still needed to cool themselves, but its primary function reverted to the practical, known only to those who actively sought it out. The decline of the fan secret. Language is a poignant reminder that even the most elaborate and deeply ingrained social practices are ephemeral. They rise and fall with the tides of culture, technology, and human needs. The fan, once a powerful instrument of social navigation and emotional expression, became a quaint antique, its intricate, silent vocabulary largely forgotten by the very society that had once cherished it. It underscores that while human nature's desire for connection and expression remains constant, the methods through which we satisfy that desire are always in flux. You've witnessed the elegant swan song of the fan's secret language, as its communicative role faded with the changing tides of history. But what became of the fan itself? As you drift into the contemporary world, you'll find that while its coded whispers are largely silenced, the humble fan still exists, fulfilling its most basic ancient purpose. You're now going to consider the fan's present-day role. Hotspossens region, Burkina Faso, where the sun beats down relentlessly and the air hangs heavy with heat and humidity. It churns out a constant worry breeze, a steady hum that forms the backdrop to daily life. It's practical, efficient, and utterly devoid of Victorian social pretense. This is the fan in its purest modern form, a utilitarian device, a workhorse of comfort, designed solely to move air. The most mainstream historical fact about fans today is their ubiquitous presence as electric cooling devices. From ceiling fans, lazily rotating overhead in homes and offices, to oscillating desk fans, battling the heat in individual workspaces. No longer a handheld status symbol, it's an appliance. Focus has shifted entirely from social signaling to pure. Has it completely vanished? Not at all. While no longer a primary tool for secret communication in most Western societies, summer collections, hand fans sometimes make a resurgence on runways and in editorial spreads. Periods. They are about style, not secret messages. Cultural artifact, performance prop in many Asian cultures. The Japanese sensu is still used in no and kabuki theater, its movements stylized and symbolic within the performance, a direct echo of its historical roots. Here, the fan still speaks, but within a defined artistic or ritualistic framework. They are practical for instant relief from the heat, and also serve as charming mementos of a trip. In places like the American South, parts of Latin America, or indeed Bobodula, you'll see them at outdoor events, church services, or simply on a porch swing, though usually unintentional and far less coded. Think of someone furiously fanning themselves to express extreme exasperation or heat, or a gentle, almost meditative fanning that conveys calm. The simple act of moving air. It's a spontaneous communication of a feeling, rather than a deliberate, pre-assigned message. It reminds us that while the formal code is gone, the fan's capacity to be an extension of human emotion still lingers. Historians still argue. Object represents a loss of cultural richness, or simply a natural adaptation to changing societal needs. Is the simplicity of its modern role a sign of progress or a diminishment of its former glory? Laden with secret meanings, modern hand fans can still be beautiful objects. Contemporary designers experiment with new materials, patterns, and forms, turning the fan into a modern art piece or a statement accessory. The artistry of the fan-making craft, though diminished in scale, has not entirely vanished. Bespoke fan makers still exist. Unlike an electric fan, which offers a passive experience, a hand fan is interactive. There's a tactile pleasure in feeling the air move at your command, a small act of agency against the heat. It connects you in a very subtle way to those ancient Egyptians and Victorian ladies who also sought that elusive comfort. You might even see echoes of the fan's past in seemingly unrelated modern behaviors. Think of someone furiously tapping their phone during a boring meeting. Is that not a distant cousin of the agitated fan flutter, or the exaggerated sigh one might make to express boredom? While not using a fan, the underlying human need to express feelings silently and subtly persists. It illustrates how objects rise and fall in prominence, how their meanings shift and how their functions adapt to evolving social and technological landscapes. The Victorian fan was a product of its time, perfectly suited to a specific set of social constraints and desires. The modern fan, whether electric or handheld, is a product of ours, efficient, accessible, and generally free from the elaborate social weight it once carried. So, while you won't likely see anyone sending secret love notes via a flick of their desk fan during your daily life in Bobo, the very existence of that fan, worry away, connects you to a lineage of human ingenuity stretching back millennia. It's a quieter, humbler legacy, perhaps, but a continuous one. The fan still serves, still cools, still provides a simple, direct comfort, having shed its cloak of silent mystery for the clear, refreshing breath of practicality. You've traveled through time, from ancient Egypt to the modern-day hum of an electric fan here in Bobo-Dioulasso, and reflected on the lost artistry of Victorian communication. Now, as our journey nears its end, let's bring it all back to the elegant object that has guided us, the fan. You're about to consider the enduring, subtle legacy of the Victorian fan and its silent stories, as they fade into history, leaving behind a calming echo. Imagine, one last time, the delicate rustle of a silk fan in a gaslit drawing room. It's a whisper from the past, a faint echo of conversations that transcended words. The fan, in its Victorian heyday, was a profound testament to human ingenuity. Instead, they innovated, transforming a simple tool for comfort into a complex instrument of expression. This mainstream historical fact, the human capacity for adaptive communication in restrictive environments, is the ultimate takeaway from the fan's story. It speaks to our fundamental need to connect, to express desire, rejection, joy, and sorrow, even when direct avenues are closed. The fan's legacy isn't about its specific codes being remembered and revived. It's about the spirit of that communication. It reminds us of a time when subtlety was an art form, where observation was paramount. It was a language of nuance, understood by those who paid attention, creating a shared intimacy that went beyond superficial pleasantries. Consider the aesthetic legacy. Victorian fans were, and remain, objects of exquisite beauty. The craftsmanship, the artistry of the painters, carvers, and lace makers who contributed to their creation speak volumes about an era that valued intricate detail and personalized luxury. These fans, now cherished antiques in museums and private collections, are not merely historical curiosities. They are tactile links to a world of refined taste and meticulous artistry. In certain, very specific, almost theatrical, social situations, a single, deliberate gesture with a hand fan can instantly convey a sense of old-world charm or a knowing, ironic nod to its historical use. Think of a drag queen on stage, dramatically snapping open a fan for emphasis, or a character in a period drama subtly fanning themselves to signal disdain. These are echoes, playful acknowledgments of a language largely forgotten, yet still capable of evoking a particular atmosphere or conveying a generalized sentiment. It's not the specific code, but the idea of coded elegance that subtly persists. Historians still argue whether the romanticization of the fan's secret language today oversimplifies the actual social complexities and potential misunderstandings of the era. Is our modern fascination with it a nostalgic longing for a more elegant past, or a genuine appreciation for a clever communicative system. It's likely a blend of both, filtered through the lens of time, shedding the anxieties of actual practice for the charm of historical curiosity. The fan also serves as a potent symbol for the broader concept of nonverbal communication, which remains incredibly powerful even in our direct digital age. While we may no longer use specific fan gestures, we still rely heavily on body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice to convey meaning. The Victorian fan simply formalized and elevated these natural human tendencies to an extraordinary degree. Its story encourages us to pay closer attention to the unspoken messages around us, perhaps casting long shadows. Let your mind drift to the silent secrets the fan held. It was a tool of empowerment for women in an era that often stifled their voices, allowing them a subtle form of agency in their social interactions. It facilitated forbidden romances, conveyed urgent warnings, and added a layer of playful intrigue to otherwise formal gatherings. It transformed the very air around a person into a canvas for their unspoken thoughts. The hum of your modern fan here in Bobo-Dioulasso provides a gentle, rhythmic backdrop as you consider this fading world. It's a world where elegance was not just about appearance, but about the delicate dance of discretion, where a look, a pause, a subtle movement could speak volumes. The Victorian fan, in its silence, paradoxically speaks the loudest about the human spirit's enduring need for connection, for art, and for finding ways to express the ink's press as the final images of rustling silk and carved ivory begin to recede. Let the gentle breeze from your fan soothe you. The secrets of the Victorian fan may largely be forgotten, its silent language a whisper in the annals of history. But the profound human stories it facilitated, the flirtations, the rejections, the hidden loves, and the quiet friendships, to resonate, a testament to the enduring power of unspoken understanding. Sleep now, knowing that even the simplest objects can carry the richest tales, and that sometimes the most profound conversations are those never spoken aloud.